Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes, or evening, everyone. Good evening to those of you who are arriving. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
Hello.
Hopefully people weren't too surprised by how early it seemed to get dark today. As I was leaving around 5 o'clock, it was almost pitch black.
Yeah, leaving Boston during this time is so different as well.
Tonight should be an interesting one because tonight there is a full lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
Technically, it's in the morning. Good evening, everyone. We have to wait for one more member to arrive, so we will have a quorum. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, hi Dan.
We're just waiting for one more member so we have a quorum. I did hear from one person they would not be able to attend. That means that 9 can. Excellent. I believe that's Kevin. Is that you, Kevin, that joined?
It is. Just changing my name.
Excellent. Thank you. So with that, we have a quorum. So call the meeting to order at 7:03. Do we have anyone who will volunteer to take minutes this evening?
I'm sure I can do that.
Okay, Anne, you're nominated to take minutes unless there's an objection. Okay, no objections, and that's up to you. Excellent. Thank you. So we've got an interesting agenda. I did hear from Theo Noel. He's expecting to join us in about 15 minutes for the discussion on the streets and sidewalks, the update of names and numbers, to have that discussion so we can have some planning board representation. So first, for members of the public, we have 2 members of the public that I'm aware of that are technically count as members of the public. That would be Tom and Bob. If you'd like to contribute during this part, you're welcome to. Otherwise, or if anyone else that I can't see wants to, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we will continue on with movement of the minutes. Okay, let's moving on to the minutes from the 17th. Thank you, Joe, for taking these minutes. Much appreciated.
Yep.
And I heard from one person who was having difficulty with Dropbox. I went ahead and sent a copy of the minutes directly to avoid that. And whether that will be an ongoing issue or not, I don't know. But for the minutes themselves, I hope everyone had a chance to review the minutes. They seem to have all of the necessary elements, had the roll call votes, time, location, how things were actually handled. Any feedback on the minutes, and then we'll take a motion.
Nope.
Okay, with that, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented for October 17th, 2022?
Motion to accept.
Kevin has made a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
Second,
And seconds the motion. Any discussion? Motion to accept the minutes. Okay, with that, we'll take a roll call vote. I will do it in the order in which people are on my screen. Okay, Catherine,
Yes.
Anne,
yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative. So unanimous vote, minutes are accepted. We'll get these converted over to the format that's needed for posting, get those posted to the website as well. That way we are trying to be in compliance with the bylaws on meetings and so forth. We actually have is the very next item on the agenda. So under item 4, review bylaws, chapter 9 for boards, committees, and commissions. We haven't actually received any updates from public bodies. As this may continue to come in, it may or may not be on the next meeting's agenda unless we get information we had agreed to keep it open at least up until the town meeting. That was something that I discussed with town administrator. So it's been on the agenda through that. If there's additional feedback after the town meeting, which may happen given that bylaws are on the agenda for town meeting, then you may see it show up similarly for future meetings. Chapter 36 on meetings, still waiting to hear back from the moderator on any updates or others we haven't as of yet. Again, we will have the opportunity to annoy the moderator in person when we get to see him in a couple of weeks. So we will do that, and we may get updates. Otherwise, I have nothing further on that item either. So with that, I'm going to defer chapter 175 until Theo is able to join us. I did send him the letter that I had sent a copy to the committee after our last meeting, and I have since had a very brief conversation with him just to give an update. And that whole goal will be to work together, but we'll come back to that. Chapter 51, I know that Eric Reed has wanted to have some updates. He's contacted me on that. I did have a email conversation with Eric on this topic and told him I'd like him to do his presentation before the whole committee, so that the whole committee is able to understand what his recommendations are for the town reports, specifically the annual report. There are some changes that he wants to make. It'll be best if he provides those items. That brings us over to the town unless anyone else has updates on chapter 51, I think we're best off deferring that particular piece until since knowing chapter 51 is going to have significant components. Any objection to moving chapter 51 to the next meeting? Okay, looks like Theo is in the process of joining us, in which case we will circle back to chapter 51, chapter 175. This is the proposal by the planning board that is on the town warrant for the town meeting that's due to happen on the 19th of this month. So it'll be Saturday morning over at the Galvin. It's a relatively small warrant, and this is the last item on it. So Theo, you are welcome to join us with screen and voice. Awesome. And so for this is to really discuss the components for the streets renaming and numbering of existing ways. The proposal coming from the planning board, and as communicated through the letter, and I had already told the committee, we had a very brief conversation about it as well. The goal is to work together to come up with a solution that really meets the core needs of this, because there were some issues that were identified by this committee, just so we don't have to do work multiple times by either board, because it is not in anyone's best interest in doing things multiple times in a short amount of time. It would be confusing to town meeting at best. So with that, Theo, if you've got anything that you'd like to discuss about this, the floor is yours.
Well, no, it is really, I think, mostly just to say thank you to you, Dan, and the entire bylaw review committee, and Councillor Tom Mullen for his prior assistance in getting us to this point. And I think, yeah, figuring out what's the most effective way to refine the language in the most successful way, but also the most time expedient way, given that this is an issue that's been before the planning board for a while, and we do want to resolve it satisfactorily without much more delay. So I haven't had a chance to communicate it formally with the other members of the planning board. They do have the letter you sent, and I did based on our conversation last night, sort of start to annotate our bylaw to the points that y'all have made. And so I think that's sort of exactly where I'm at today. I do wonder if there's anything that could be fixed sort of immediately that just gets us even closer to the goal line now, or if there are other reference materials Tom Mullen or others can point us to use to perhaps also cure some of the, resolve some of your criticisms. But obviously that may or may not be before Saturday the 19th.
Okay, so with that, I believe is it my Lord Barrister Mullen? Is that the preferred way of addressing you these days?
Yeah, I forgot the wig today.
Again, I'm really hoping for the 19th that you have the wig and robe.
And road, that's right. So I'm not aware of any resources to point you to. I don't think I've seen a street naming bylaw in other towns. So I guess, and certainly it's too late now to change what's on the warrant.
Right.
Not that I think what's on the warrant is bad, but the committee did have some issues. Maybe we should just talk about those and decide which, if any of them, would be worth being the substance of a floor amendment.
I'm certainly very welcome to that. Yeah, I've got.
So with that, I think that will open up the discussion. And Tom, if I can ask, if you can give us your opinion, if you feel that any of these changes would be likely to fall outside of the four corners as maybe interpreted by the moderator, let us know, because then it would change the action that would be needed at this town meeting. Because if we can fix everything with a floor amendment, that would certainly be that would certainly keep it expedited. If it's going to be something that you think would be outside the four corners, please let us know, because it may then just change how we handle it for this particular town meeting.
Do you want to? Well, I don't want to hog your meeting. I can share my screen if you want. So I mean the first comment was that the opening paragraph wasn't satisfactory in not conflicting with sections 3A, and 3B. So we needed a sentence in the beginning that says this bylaw does not remove any rights given to the town or public as granted, including but not limited to General Law, Chapter 85, sections 3A, and 3B.
I think that adding a sentence or something to that effect would probably address the issue, Bob, and I know you had raised this, to make sure that it is very apparent that citizens have the right of appeal that's granted by, I believe it was one of those three sections, so that it is explicit that we're not removing those rights or limiting those rights without having to copy those those explicit rights into the bylaw. So we're referencing them by reference. Can that be done, Tom?
Yeah, that was my biggest concern, was the appeal rights in Chapter 85, Section 3. Obviously, we can't write a bylaw that eliminates the rights to appeal guaranteed by the state statute. But when this proposal didn't even reference that section about appeal, I don't think that residents need to go and do the extra step of looking to see if there's an applicable Massachusetts general law if they want to appeal. I think having a reference in your proposed bylaw makes it easier for the reader to read that bylaw and then understand, oh, here's the place I need to go to if I want to exercise my right to appeal. And that's section 3 of chapter 85.
Yeah.
So what I'm taking from that, and by all means, other committee members, please chime in, is that in the opening paragraph, there should be a statement, and Theo, I think you had the language pretty good on that, that this does not take away any rights, including appeal as specified in MGL chapter 85,
Yeah.
sections 3, 3A and 3B, something along those lines, just to Bob's issue. I think that it makes it then explicitly clear that this is not removing or trying to remove those rights. Tom, would that be something that could be added without a problem?
Sure.
All right. Okay. Well, all right. The second section was under paragraph A. The second comment was shall not have more characters than set by DPW regulations, and it's the use of the word regulation, which we think should be changed to something to the effect of set by current policies, procedures, or practices of the DPW. Since we are not, we wanted to be accommodating to future signage limitations. Not knowing what those might be.
Theo, could you point to me again where in the bylaw you'd point the regulation?
Yeah, it's the bottom of 3A, right?
Got
there.
it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So it really, it is changing the word regulations, was what we understood.
So thinking out loud here, is this sentence even necessary? Because ultimately any proposal needs to go the way this is written before both the planning board and the town council. And if it was not feasible by DPW, that would be something that I would expect that the town council, since they supervise the DPW, would need to address directly, or work with the DPW to see if there's a workaround. And what comes to mind is if there is a way that was being renamed for a person that is now deceased, that could actually require more characters than is currently used. It might be handled in a slightly different way by the DPW. So it may be something that is deemed important enough by the town to allow for that. And so my concern is that if we state that it's based on current regulations, that doesn't allow for a change that this could be the catalyst for. So an example would be a way that in front of, say, the Galvin Middle School that might be renamed the Paula Mullen Way. That has a lot of characters in it. I forget what, I think it's Paula F. Mullen. And that would have more characters than a current street sign would typically have. And so it might need to be in a smaller font or otherwise handled by the DPW with the consent of the town council. But that's something that if we were to go by current regulations, it might say we're limited to 15 characters. It might preclude even having that type of option.
So Dan, they don't use the term current regulations, and in any event, I'd feel comfortable saying that the bylaw ought to be construed to mean the regulations as they may from time to time be amended. That said, I think you could strike the sentence entirely. You know, if a given requested name is unworkably long, that's a good reason to say no.
Mhm.
Theo,
Yes.
as you know, a member of the planning board, you can't speak, and I'm not asking you to speak for the planning board. Do you think that there would be that it would be a problem to remove the sentence entirely?
No, not at all. When we all the research, you really see like the street name change procedures that are in place really are about like 15 to 24 characters. You know, they're really getting into the nitty gritty, and so we did feel that that's sort of where a lot of this was coming from, just to set some basic ground rules. But yeah, we'd be happy to delete that. That's it's not critical.
So moving to the next part of that is the prior sentence,
Yeah,
which is no proposed street name shall be used to honor any living person or any business entity. And I'm trying to figure out how would that be determined by where the application doesn't actually require a specific process for it. Because so many people there are so many people who have similar names. There are other Daniel Liebers. I don't know how the world survives with multiple Daniel Liebers, but it does, including at least one other one in the Boston area. And so the idea of saying that it doesn't honor a living person, if we were to have, you know, a name such as Mullen Way, that just as Mullen Way, it could be interpreted that it's named after a living person because we happen to have one in this meeting.
Dan, I really wouldn't want to waste any time on that. I mean, if we propose to name a street General Grant Road, and there happens to be a living general by the name of Grant, that doesn't mean that we are precluded, because the key term here is honor. Street names shall be used to honor any living person or any business entity.
And the other part of that is there a reason why business entities cannot be effectively honored? And I'm thinking if there's a desire for a street that a business is going on that could be, such as a subdevelopment often has a name of the main street in it, it could then cause a problem. So an example would be Edgewater, which the Edgewater development is probably Edgewater, Edgewater LLC or something along those lines. And so to have a business entity could actually mean that business entities have to be renamed. Just it's the way a lot of properties are owned in trust for and so forth. They actually reference the street or the number through it, which would be different than say we want to call something Sardella Way after the Sardella signs. But and I'm just choosing a random business in town for that purpose. But I'm trying to figure out if there's a reason why the business entities need to be excluded in this way.
yeah, I would say that it's a pretty useful limitation because, you know, we're talking about changing existing street names that people know and are familiar with. And I think if you start changing streets after corporations or businesses, you affect the character of the town. So I that we would want to prohibit that so that you don't invite a whole bunch of stuff.
Is business entity specific enough to include all of the various types of organizational structures that may be created? Could someone argue that an LLC is not a business entity?
Oh, no, actually, I think
No.
the use of the language here is appropriately broad. I think that
Okay.
that pretty much
Yeah.
closes the net on anything you could use
Mhm.
to describe a business.
Okay, good.
Other thoughts on this issue?
I like what Theo said with regard to if corporations start trying to name streets after themselves, it does change the character, I believe, of certain neighborhoods. So I have no problem leaving that in there. And I think business entity is broad enough to cover what the intent of the section is.
Next is the application process.
Mhm.
So for the application process, we have the proponent of a street name change shall file a written application with the town clerk together with a filing fee of $800. The way that this is currently written is that the proponent is anticipated to be an individual. And amongst the things we discussed at our last meeting is that the proponent may actually be a town body. It may be a board, such as, say, the Human Rights Commission that makes a initiative to rename an existing way, which might be to honor someone who is deceased or otherwise. And there may be a desire just to minimize confusion to waive the $800 fee. And so we may want to figure out how to accommodate those particular use cases within this sentence or an expansion of it. And Tom, if you've got ideas on how that can be done, open to your suggestions for that as well.
Well, we might say that the the filing fee does not apply if the applicant is a town body. A public body of the town.
Others' thoughts? I like that wording because I think that
Yep.
if someone had an issue with it, they could actually go to the town council then and petition the town council to make the request, which would then be a town body in and of itself, if they could get the councilors to agree on such a thing. The town council is making the request on their own behalf. So I think that actually would address both concerns at the same time, provides a path forward.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Yeah, you did also question the dollar amount, right?
The $800 didn't seem to be a problem in and of itself, as long as there's a waiver capability, which this would provide for.
Okay.
We may want to have additional costs also passed on to the proponent, because there are additional costs in addition to the $800
Yeah.
that will get addressed as well. So the $800 to make it so that this isn't something that's done without thought by someone seems a moderate deterrent, in as Barrister Mullen put it, could easily be justified in terms of the costs. So the application says need not follow any particular format. If there's a way to indicate who is responsible for the application and the application process, that may be simpler than stating that it's not for a particular format, because that may actually also address things such as the number of characters and other components and the intent. So is that something that I'm not sure who that would be for, either the planning board, would that be the assessors, engineering? Is that something that could be assigned to a particular department to create that form that could be referenced here?
Dan,
Is
you
it
want to
necessary?
create a form that people use to propose name changes to existing streets? I mean, I would hope this happens like once a decade at most. I wouldn't think we'd want to encourage a lot of suggestions by having a pre-printed form to fill out. You know, and I'd hope that we wouldn't have a lot of de facto waivers of the fee for the same reason.
I would tend to agree. I'm just trying, I'm trying to be cautious that when someone does inquire about it, that there is a process, or that there are other pieces that are indicated, so that in here, if that the application need not follow any format, but it shall then indicate, you know, the way that is being proposed, the proposed name. It doesn't state the reason, but we may want to add the reason and or rationale, so that we know whether it is honoring, you know, someone who is deceased, because otherwise it's just, I move to rename Main Street to, you know, say Mullen Street, or something along those lines, without any without detail, and it would technically be acceptable, and we wouldn't necessarily know what the reason is. So I'm thinking that rationale of some sort may need to be added in here.
So I have no problem adding another criterion that you state the rationale. But I think it is important to say need not follow any particular format. I think we have similar language in our charter with respect to people who want to propose articles for town meeting. And that's very intentional. You know, that's how you broaden it, by making clear you don't need to know magic words.
Okay. And if we may need to change subsection 3 here, where it says be signed by the proponent whose name and address must be clearly visible. That would apply to an individual, but it wouldn't necessarily apply to a town body.
Say that again. Just.
It's subsection 3 right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where it says to be signed by a proponent.
Right,
If the proponent is a town body, name and address, it doesn't quite apply. Name would apply, but the address, the town bodies don't necessarily have a specific street address.
Mhm.
Especially where we meet on Zoom
Yeah.
most of the time.
Right. All right.
The address is Zoom 1 on the Internet Superhighway. I don't think that's quite the address that was intended.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't the address of the DPW be the address of town hall? And would you want the director of DPW to sign the form?
That's if the DPW wouldn't be a town body. Town body would be like Human Rights Commission.
Couldn't the address default to town hall though?
Yeah.
Since that's where the genesis of all these committees are.
I think that if there's an exception, if it's signed by, if the proponent is not a town body. If it's town body, it seems to be unnecessary to put in that piece.
Yeah, I don't know that we have to mention it. Town bodies have names, they have addresses.
Okay.
And the town bodies don't all have the same address. They're not all town hall, like the school committee.
Okay.
Okay, next is town clerk shall, after receipt of the application and fee, is it safe to say that that leaving the word "and fee" there would still be acceptable even if there's no fee? So I make sure that that doesn't present an issue.
You might say, and any applicable fee.
Okay. So the next part for the town clerk shall also assemble a list of names and addresses of all owners of property abutting the way and all persons residing at such properties. If there's a way that we can put in something about all known individuals as well as businesses. Because right now businesses don't get notice.
Mhm.
And depending upon the type of property, people residing may be inherently transient. For certain streets where we have places that are such as halfway houses and so forth, the people tend to be more transient than the town clerk would normally know about. So it can't just be based upon who are voters and so forth, because this is a very significant change that would affect people in a very material way. So with that, I think it also justifies the fee very easily because this becomes actually a significant task for the town clerk.
Right. So we did struggle with this for precisely the reasons you're mentioning, and also struggling with like sort of the when it's a subdivision, you're talking about affected abutters and things like that, and trying to get to not just the landowners or the business owners, but again the persons residing who might be affected.
It's persons and businesses residing. Most businesses that have storefronts rent in the town as opposed to own property. And the businesses to have a street rename is a very, very significant impact. So that's something the businesses all do need to have some sort of registration, whether it's at corporate level, which would be with the state, or they would have a DBA or something with the town itself. So again, it becomes something that between the town clerk and the assessor, they should know who most of the businesses, if not all of the businesses that are registered and operating properly are. For people who are operating as themselves, obviously they would be as an individual already. But for most businesses, and so many businesses that don't go through the DBA process, the registrations are available elsewhere. But I think that to have them included would make sense. If the purpose of having the list is to notify people who are affected, we would want to make sure that businesses and organizations are also included.
Yeah, so a list of all known property owners, persons, and businesses residing at such properties. Or something to that effect. Okay.
Tom, can that be added without difficulty?
Yep.
Others' thoughts?
Dan, did we decide that we were adding like a fourth with regard to the reasons for the suggested change?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other suggestions, thoughts on this? Other thoughts on the application process?
You did question the last sentence. The town clerk shall forward the list together with the application to the planning board for a public hearing. And you thought that put the onus on the planning board to do the mailing to notify all those affected. And we
Which-
understood that to be the responsibility of the assessor's office.
That's actually the beginning of part C.
Oh, okay, all right.
Dan, this is Joe. We did talk about at the last meeting about maybe having a list of names of like maybe over 60-70% in favor of a name change before it actually went further.
As an alternative, as one option
Mhm.
for a process. So as opposed to just making an individual, an alternative application process would be if there was a threshold. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that out. A threshold of, say 70% or 80% of the residents or property owners who wish there to be a change, that would be a way to also request a change. And they may, and there can be good grounds for a change because a street name may be deemed offensive due to societal changes, or it may just be confusing. An example might be, say, Cedar Court, which has about 5 or 6 houses on it. And so if the people who live on that wanted to rename it from Cedar Court to something else, if they were to agree to it, it doesn't require them to not only pay the $800 plus the signage changes and other pieces, and then have the potential change all done by a single individual. They could have a petition as a group. So all of the affected owners could potentially do that. But thoughts on that? Would that be something that would be potentially outside the bounds, or is that something that would be deemed acceptable as effectively an alternative application process?
It seems like an awful long way to go. Remember, we're going to be amending an article on the floor of town meeting to deal with a situation that, as a practical matter, would be approached politically. In the Cedar Court example, somebody would go to a member of the town council and say, hey, me and all my neighbors, we want to change the street to X. Do you want to be our hero and propose it? And of course, it would get done for free. Yeah. I just avoid overcomplicating what ought to be a pretty simple procedure.
Joe, any thoughts on that?
Well, I only bring it up because if there's 10 people living on the street and 9 of them say no, then what's the point of even getting that far, I mean, if nine neighbors don't want to change, then I feel like it should just get squashed right there, not even get to the hearing.
Yeah, I think we were thinking about it less as a sort of like alternative application process and more as a way, as a threshold to make sure that like the town isn't going through the process of and all of the costs associated with developing a public hearing and pulling together the list of all the affected parties, et cetera, if like there isn't enough support to begin with for the proposal to move forward.
So the idea is that the proponent shall file the written application along with a petition signed by X percentage of the affected parties, or X percentage of the property owners and residents.
We struggled with that because you get into issues of who certifies that you have the right percentage. Which would be the in truth the assessor's office, but that again still remains problematic.
Tom, any suggestions how to?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like a lot of hoops we're asking somebody to jump through. He's, in addition to paying $800, he's got to go door to door and collect signatures.
Well, he wouldn't even have to, I mean, at this point, he wouldn't even get to the $800, right? I mean, he wouldn't have to pay for that. If he doesn't have to support, then it doesn't waste his money and it doesn't waste the town's time, is what I think we were trying to get at. But I mean, it, again, like to your point, Tom, earlier, this doesn't usually happen anyway, so.
Yeah.
And it could be if there isn't support, that will certainly come out at the public hearing. And even if it comes out after the public hearing, it still has to go before the town council. And as long as someone who's affected reaches town councilors, there is a voice to be had, and there's still an appeal process. So that could potentially remedy it without having a problem. I think we may want to address it by making sure that we have enough notice so that people are given notice in many ways as possible.
I guess I don't mind that a person might be wasting $800 because I would think it's their responsibility to go around to their neighbors and say, hey, I'm thinking of changing the street name. And if they still don't garner that support and they still want to push forward, I don't know, kind of on them.
True.
Agree.
So for the public hearing, so the planning board shall conduct a public hearing within 30 days after receiving the application, and the list of owners, residents, and business and other entities from the town clerk. What isn't clear to me, Tom, you may have thoughts on this, is does this put a time, does this effectively leave a pocket veto in the town clerk if they don't actually create that list in a timely manner? Because it looks like the 30 days doesn't actually start until they receive that list.
Well, I mean, I think the 30 days is directory and not mandatory. I mean, what would be the consequence of missing the 30 days? The guy forfeits his $800, or automatically the street name changes. I mean, our laws and bylaws are among them are replete with deadlines that don't really have any legal consequence. They are simply there so that we have some guidelines as to when things are supposed to get done.
So the 30 days, it seems fast to get to from when that is received to actually do the notice, have people figure out what's going on, and then hold the public hearing. So it is where I'd actually extend that out so that there can be time to do the assembly, do the publication, have that notice. And I'm thinking just off the cuff, 45 or 60 days seems like it would be more sufficient, so that depending upon the number of people that have to be notified, there's different ways for that. Without it, there may, even as a directory component, that if someone were to wanted to make this change and do it relatively quietly, they could do it around June 20th, when very little is occurring, and now all of a sudden you're having a public hearing sometime in July when people are less likely to be aware of it and attend. As opposed to if there's 45 or 60 days on it, it at least gives more duration, more flexibility. Thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly have no problem with changing the period of time, giving the, town officers who have work to do more time to get it done. Sure.
Theo, is your sense from the discussions that have happened on the planning board, if that number were to be changed to say 60 days, would that be problematic?
Sorry. No, that would be a problem, but I'm gonna sneeze, excuse me.
Well, you're not sneezing at the comment, it's all good.
Very good, yeah. All right. Yeah.
So others thoughts on changing the duration? Because I'm thinking to give more time for the various processes that are about to be delineated in here. I think would probably be appreciated by the people who have to do the work.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think 60 days is up to 60 is sufficient.
Bob, do you have any thoughts on this as one of our town councilors and a liaison?
And that sounds appropriate to me.
So
Great.
with that, Tom, if we could change that number to 60 days.
Yeah.
The next part is planning board shall give notice of such hearing by publication in newspaper published in the town once in each of 2 successive weeks. The last publication to be at least 2 days before the hearing. And by mailing notice to all owners and residents. So it should probably be owners, residents, and businesses and organizations listed by the town clerk at least 1 week before the hearing. One discussion that we did have is that notice could also be posted on properties. So that way, if we have, say, an apartment, if there's a renaming of one of the streets that say Grayson Lofts is on, where it may be deemed sufficient to put notices on the doors, so that people are aware that the Foundry Street is being proposed to be renamed, because it's an inherently transient type of environment. Is that something that could be added? The language?
Is that something that's frequently done in other?
I guess I can speak to that. The only corollary I can think of is if the Board of Selectmen in a town is going to be laying out a new public way street layout, they have to issue notice of the layout hearing and have it physically delivered to every household on the street. There's a statute that requires that.
And in a lot of ways, this seems to be of similar importance, because it's, again, going to affect every single person who lives or does business on that particular street. And a lot of people don't get the newspapers. Especially if they're relatively transient in the town, or businesses that are not retail oriented, they may not have other ways of doing a lot of business to be aware of a change that ultimately could have a material impact on their mail and other pieces. So that's where I think to do that, I think, is reasonable. I think that the costs of that should also be passed on, if it is an individual or otherwise, should be passed on to the petitioner as well, if it's not a town body. The costs in the entirety of the publication and of the mailings.
Did we also discuss a digital posting on the town website to be consistent with some of the other public notices suggestions we've made in the bylaws?
Do we use the internet in this town?
Well, I mean, it would be part of the planning board's agenda. So,
But to add and, you know, post a notice to the town website would be consistent with how other notices are handled as well.
okay. I mean, when we're doing the subdivision review, right, that gets its own, there are lots of documents, so, that gets its own section. Wouldn't be a problem.
Tom, thoughts on those
Yeah.
components?
I think that merely having it in the planning board's agenda really isn't sufficient, because that could just be as little as 48 hours notice.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is if we're going to be giving notice a week or 2 weeks in advance, then in these various other ways, we should probably do it in the cheapest possible way, which is putting it on the website at the same period.
Mhm.
And is there a way that we can put language in that the costs shall be borne by the petitioner for this?
Well, with $800 is a lot of money for a filing fee. I think you're going to get questions at town meeting. How much are, what's the $800 cover?
It was intended to cover these kinds of administrative costs of the clerk in the assessor's office. We saw a huge range of fees out there. After conversation with the town clerk, we came up, she recommended, and we accepted 800.
Okay, and I have no problem with 800 if it's all inclusive. But Theo, in those other towns, did you ever see any that charged something like 800 and then also made them pay for the notices separately?
I would have to double check, but I'm thinking like Wellfleet was, the fee was, $2,000 or more. But that's it's I think we have the answer. I would have to dig it up, but that's certainly an answer I need to defend with you and with the town.
So Dan, anyway, in answer to your question, certainly I can write whatever you want in this. I just want everybody to be aware that one, $800 is way higher than most of our fees. And two, whenever we set fees, somebody always gets up at town meeting and questions the justification.
If Theo, if you and the planning board had run this by town clerk, Betsy Sharon.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that if she thought the $800 would not cover the postings and public notices, she would have brought that up.
Yeah.
Just knowing how Betsy is meticulous about numbers. I don't know.
Although one of the things I've already heard here is I'm not sure if she realized she would have to incur the cost of the mailings. I think of, Foundry Street, which has hundreds and hundreds of residents. And I think of Quannapout Parkway, which is going to have hundreds, if not thousands of residents. And those costs would dwarf the $800. That's where I'm not opposed to the $800, because in that case, the $800 would certainly be justified just in the cost of figuring out who is living and operating and the time spent to do all of that assembly. There's a significant amount of labor that's required for anything along those lines. And it becomes for
Sure.
streets along those lines where you have apartments and where we have more and more multi types of housing in town, the $800 may not be sufficient just in terms of the number of pieces that have to be prepped, printed, mailed. It just it all of a sudden $800 doesn't feel high enough to cover the costs of something so significant. And Foundry Street would be an example of a street that could very easily be renamed for where it no longer has foundries and things along those lines on it. It could be renamed for something, or Quantapowhat, because it's hard to pronounce. Even though the lake is named after it, I could see where there is a movement to rename it something more simple. So that's where I just want to make sure that if there's going to be significant costs, those get passed on to the petitioner, unless it's a town board, in which case that board is agreeing that this is so significant that no fee is necessary at all. So if there's potentially, and Theo, maybe this gets bumped back to you, that if the fee was anticipated that it would cover whatever costs there are, maybe the fee gets reduced down to say $500, which would is still expensive, but and in some ways a deterrent, but could certainly be used to justify the cost of labor for initial assembly plus the cost of doing the postings. And I'm not sure what the highest fee is that we have in town. Tom, your thoughts on that? Because I hear what you're saying about justification.
Mhm.
Trying to square the circle.
Mhm. Well, what we might say is to whatever extent the actual cost of notice exceeds the $800 fee, the process will go forth only if the applicant pays the fee, pays that amount in advance.
That would seem to solve the issue. So there's a minimum fee that's significant and it protects the town. Because what I'm trying to prevent here is the potential use of this bylaw as weaponization to cause havoc.
Mhm.
And some of our residents do like to cause havoc from time to time. And where this gives a process by which any individual who wishes to plunk down money to create havoc, all of a sudden, if that money becomes more significant, that may present enough of a deterrent.
And I used to think you were among them. But I'm a big fan now, so.
Think how time has changed.
Yeah.
There was a time that I was told that we would never have a dog park in this town. I think that was in 2004. And how times have changed, and our dogs now get to play at the dog park. So yes, things do change over time.
So, yeah, big fan of the dog park. That's really helpful language. Obviously, that seems a little more complicated to iron out before the town meeting. I mean, maybe not, but
Tom, is that something that can be written in pretty easily?
Well, I can add it. I mean, I agree with Theo. It's kind of a complicated elaboration.
I like that phrase.
But I think it's as much as I agree it's somewhat complicated, I also think that it's important to protect the town.
Agreed.
Well, can't you just add wording to the fact that the more abutters, the more cost may be incurred, kind of thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially if we're going to have an in-person cost as well. the $800 could be eaten up, and someone may find, if they really want to do this, that the cost is, you know, 6,000 or something along those lines, which they may be fine with. It may be deemed of importance, or they may not. But it would make it so that the town is not incurring the cost for this without a town body supporting it initially. So what it does is it is intended to limit the weaponization and maximize it as a political matter.
Dan, in-person notice, I didn't catch that we are including that.
Not necessarily in person or on properties. So a notice can be provided, or maybe that it's just recommended. The notice is for notices presented is posted on properties, and it may not be posted by the town. Or copies of notice are recommended for posting on properties. It's something along those lines, so that the intent is very clear, so that people who who aren't otherwise known but will be affected have a reasonable way of getting notice.
Okay.
And it's the petitioner's responsibility to do the posting.
Do it or pay for it.
Yeah.
They'll have to pay for it, but the town should be responsible for doing the posting.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
because if the town is charging for it, the town can charge for the labor.
Yeah, and again, by analogy to the way we handle the street layouts, it's actually some town employees who go door to door and hand out the notices.
Yeah.
As long as the weather's good, it sounds like a fun job.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments on this piece?
No.
Next sentence, notice of the hearing shall be sent by email to fire department, police department, and a whole bunch of others, including postmaster. I'm thinking here we may want to remove the words by email. Just notice of the hearing shall also be sent to. How it's sent, I think, should be administratively determined, because that may vary depending upon the location, such as a postmaster may or may not get email specifically, and that should be left to the town administrator or whoever is in this case planning board who's holding the meeting. I don't think it would preclude email. It would just be at the discretion as long as the notice is being given. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
So for this, was there discussion with the fire chief, police chief, and town engineer on giving written reports and recommendations with changes?
Um,
I'm referring to the sentence prior to the public hearing. Fire chief, police chief, and town engineer shall each give their written report and recommendation. I just want to make sure that they were consulted as to whether they want to be explicitly required to give a written report.
So we thought, I mean, this is analogous to again, subdivisions where, right, tell us if there's any impacts that we need to be aware of. So and you get an email from the fire chief saying, yeah, there's we can turn around on the street. Yeah, there's no impact. I think a written report and recommendation is useful.
And I don't have a problem with it. I'm just thinking from a practical matter to make sure that prior to town meeting, that they are in agreement, that they will do that is the expectation, so that if this process comes up and someone goes to Chief Scory and says, okay, you know, what do you think about this? We don't want him to say, well, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
We did not go that route because we didn't feel that it was any different than anything else that, you know, that would come from the planning board to them. We didn't think it would be an imposition.
I'm actually not worried about this language, Dan. We asked them to give their thoughts on a lot of different but similar requests, and it's in a report sounds very fancy. Oftentimes it's an email saying police have no objection to this happening. So it's just running by them. I don't think, you know, their town departments, I don't know that we have to check in with them to see if they're okay with this. I don't know, Tom, if you disagree with that.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought. I think they know that it's their job to do whatever the bylaws say that they've got to do. And they are accustomed to dealing with the planning board in this respect every time there's a subdivision.
Okay, and it's just a matter of making, my suggestion here is really more political than it is in any language changes. So they are aware that they're being referenced to actually take action with this.
Yeah.
I don't think that they will have a problem with it. I think that they will appreciate knowing, okay, hey, you're being referenced in here. Just a quick notice to each of them. I don't think that either Chief Scory nor Chief Sullivan is going to have a problem at all. They'll say, okay, this seems fine, is what I would expect to hear back. We just don't want there to be an issue at town meeting with someone asking them, why, you know, is this something that has to get asked? Or, you know, were they aware of this? Something along those lines. Okay, planning board shall vote to the town council within 30 days of the opening of the public hearing and shall forward its recommendation to the town council forthwith following such vote. It's among the very few times I've seen forthwith come up in our bylaws. Tends to be a very fancy word, Barrister Mullen.
I keep looking for opportunities to say where and before to which.
So this will limit the public hearing to 30 days. I don't have a problem with that. Just want to make that clear so that the public hearing obviously can be continued, but it would have to be closed within the 30 days as from at least an advisory perspective, from a directory perspective. To what Tom was saying earlier, I don't think there's going to be a penalty if it were to extend beyond that, especially as a public hearing, if there's a lot of discussion. Is that a reasonable interpretation?
Yeah.
Then action by the town council. Glad that we've got a town councilor here along with former town councilors. So town council shall promptly review and act on the recommendation by the planning board with respect to the proposed name change, although the definition of promptly is left to the town council is my interpretation of this. So how promptly it is really up to the town council itself. Is that a correct interpretation? It's just setting an expectation that it's not going to linger and be 3 months, but it could be. It's up to the town council.
I like that. I like that language.
If they decline to make the name change, the town council is responsible for informing the applicant and town clerk. If the town council approves the name change, then in addition to notifying them, shall request payment from the applicant to cover the cost of changing and installing all signage and sending notice by certified mail, return receipt requested to all persons residing on the affected street or owning property thereon. Here we should also add businesses, businesses and organizations. does that need to be certified mail with return receipts? Especially given the way the post office has changed how mail operates, because there is notification now with all certified mail without having to have a green card. So I'm wondering whether I think the intent here is certified mail just shows that it was mailed, but do we want to actually have that additional cost? That's around $5 per recipient, additional $5 to $6 per recipient. That's additional cost on that, as opposed to standard mailing or mailing with other pieces on it.
Can I ask a question? And I might be completely missing it. Does this suggest that the person doesn't have to pay the 800 if the town council declines to make the name change?
No, the 800's paid first.
Okay, so then it's extra money. If the town council approves the name change, in addition to notifying the applicant, blah, 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 it shall request payment from the applicant to cover the cost of changing and installing all signage. So that's a cost over and above the 800?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And above the costs that may have already also been charged for the public hearing. So this is now potentially a third time going to the applicant
Yeah.
for money is my reading of it.
Yeah,
Right.
you know, Dan, now that we go into depth on it, I'm beginning to wonder about the wisdom of certified mail. I mean, when we require notice, I don't know, it's a lot of money to spend, and on a long street could be a great deal of money.
Mm.
And really all we want to do is have a final opportunity to apprise people of the coming change.
And their appeal rights.
Yeah.
But I think that given the costs of certified mail return receipt requested, that seems to be really excessive of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So we'll remove certified.
Certified mail return receipt request. I think that at this point, US mail will be delivered or not. I don't think that it's going to matter, especially if we've already spent so much effort and time giving public notice as well.
Yeah.
Do we need to give any timing indication? So sending notice of the change, are there parameters that need to be established of when the change would happen? 30 days from now, 60 days from now? Just so that I'm thinking businesses especially that would have to go through a lot of the hoops to change everything on their end for an address change.
Mhm.
There should, to your point, Kevin, I think that we probably should put a minimum amount of time, probably minimum and a maximum amount of time expectations, at least as a directory mechanism. Name changes should not take effect for, minimum of 90 days from a vote, or 120 days, and, and should take place within 1 year. So there is a significant delay so that organizations can advise of that update. Because depending upon the signage that they need, it can take a long time to get signage. If it's a inner lit sign that someone has to have made, or they have to have a sign out for a business remade that may be outside, it can take a few months to get that ordered and installed.
So, that we're just talking about public street signage. So it is a good comment about the street name change not taking effect for a certain period of time, because that also fits into the appeals process.
Right.
Because you've got 30 days to file an appeal after the change has been approved.
Mhm.
So you gotta bear that in mind. And that also requires 25 inhabitants of the town to file that appeal. So they gotta have notice that the change was made and have sufficient time to go get 24 other people to agree with them to appeal under the state statute.
So 25 people within 30 days.
The specific language is said appeal shall be taken within 30 days after such change and shall be by petition of at least 25 inhabitants of the town in which such change has been made, requesting the reversal of such action.
Yeah, well, we can just make sure that the notice includes notice of their appeal rights under that statute.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't think we want to broaden those appeal rights. I mean, make them broader, greater than they have to be. And we can't make them any less than they are set to be.
And to that point, I think that should be in the notice of the hearing. And that may be in the where we want to put in the mailing notice, which includes the appeal rights to all owners and residents in section C, because the action by town council, by the time the town council notifies the town clerk figures out what the cost is, notifies the applicant, then receives the money, then actually does the mailings. That's going to be time as well. And so that's where what I'm thinking is that we may want to add in a statement, it may be another section or just statement in section D that says name changes shall not take effect for no less than 120 days from a vote of the town council and no more than 1 year. So that way the expectation is there, the notice will be done and received by people, whether they have the appeal or not. That is a separate issue, but the date of the effective date of the change isn't 31 days after the vote.
Right.
So that it doesn't affect people that quickly.
Dan, you're not talking about two separate notices of appellate rights, are you?
No, the only notice of appeal rights would be in the public hearing notice. This is the notice of the change itself.
Wouldn't you put it in the action by town council in D?
I wouldn't put it in action by town council because this is actually after the town council's acted.
Yeah.
And
That's when the appellate rights kick in.
that's when the appellate, well, that's when the appellate timer kicks in.
Well,
The rights are always granted, but we don't want to put the timer, we don't want to put a 30-day limit. We don't want, what I can envision is that it might take 30 days to assemble all of the information and get the payment from a person. And then someone could say, well, I would have appealed, but I didn't know about the change because you didn't, or the appeal rights because you didn't tell me until 32 days after it took place.
well, the 30 days runs from the date of the change of the name. And so if the change of the name isn't going to happen for 90 days, you got plenty of time. And I don't think it makes sense to notify people of appellate rights in the notice of the hearing, because at that point, nothing's happened and maybe that nothing will happen.
Okay, so the 30 days is after the signage is already changed, is your interpretation of that?
I'm looking at chapter 85, section 3, which says, when the name of any public way is changed by the board or officer having jurisdiction thereof, if the name change has been used for 25 years or more, there shall be a right of appeal from such action to the department. Said appeal shall be taken within 30 days after such change. And I would construe that to mean after the effective date of the change.
Okay, in which case without interpretation, I would agree with you that it would make sense to notify them of the appeal in the final action of town council. I think we should still delay the effect, put in the action by town council, the effective date shall some sort of time bar that makes it so it doesn't take effect too quickly, and that will actually in some ways enhance the ability if someone has a real problem with it. It gives them, at least however many days are left in that time period if they want to appeal back to the board that already made the decision. But it also gives the individuals and businesses the time to prepare for the change itself. Because if there's going to be a name change, say picking on Cedar Court, people who live on Cedar Court will need to make the change, and they may need to notify all of the different organizations that they coordinate with, that they correspond with, and that can be significant. For a business, that can be very, very significant and time consuming. So I think that we want to make it so that that doesn't take effect 30 days or 60 days after a vote. We want to give some time for that.
Right.
Thoughts on what that timing should be? And I think there can probably be added just that action by town council should not take effect for a minimum of, say, 120 days from shall be specified by the town council to not take effect no less than 120 days and no more than 306 than 1 year from the effective date or from the date of such vote.
Right.
Thoughts on timing for that?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And the appeal, did you say something, Dan, to suggest you were thinking of an appeal to the town council?
That's what that was my interpretation of where the appeal would go, because they're the ones that are actually voting on the name change itself.
No, the appeal comes after the town council votes.
Right, but the appeal goes back to the town council itself.
No, under chapter 85, section 3, it goes to what the statute calls the department, which I think is the Department of Transportation. It's an appeal to the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob, is that in your interpretation as well?
I have no idea. I'm a Maryland licensed attorney, not Massachusetts. I'll go on a limb and say I agree with Tom.
The barrister is right.
Cool. Wow.
Okay, yeah, in chapter 85, section 2, it says the Department of Highways in this chapter called the department.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's Mass DOT.
So that's where someone would have to appeal, in which case it would make sense. But I think that if we put in a time expectation, what do people think would be the right timing to give people, businesses, and so forth time to be aware of a name change, and then also to take effect? I think that date should be set by the town council, because they're the ones that are responsible for. But what time bar seems to be reasonable? My initial thinking is 120 days to 1 year. depending upon the street and significance, I would anticipate that they would have the knowledge of what would be the best timing for it, because it could be that they wanted to take effect on January 1st or some other date that they deem significant. Thoughts?
I think that makes sense. There might be construction going on. There might be projects happening that could impact. So yeah, 120 to a year sounds okay.
Theo, does that seem to be consistent with the planning board's intent here?
For sure.
Bob, thoughts?
That sounds good to me.
Others on the committee, thoughts on this? I know several of you have or work for small businesses and things along those lines, and I'm thinking about the impact that a name change would have. Would that be sufficient time to do the necessary notifications? And then even in personal lives, to figure out who you're actually corresponding with and do the appropriate notifications.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I was just curious whether there was existing like guidance around that. If that change is made, or if there's ever a need for some other reason to change a street name or to change an address. Whether there's just existing guidance around timeframes of effective dates. And even like in, you know, when you change your own address because you're moving or whatever, you have like some level of grace period and that you can request forwarding. Like, is there something that already happens in this type of scenario?
I can't think of any.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Tom, could that language around timing be added and still
Yes.
be within four corners? I think that would address pieces. I think that something that in the action by town council, the notice to the applicant and town clerk should probably just specify something that also indicates that there's an expectation that will include the appeal, reference to the appeal rights, just so that it doesn't seem like the town is not aware of that, but it doesn't have to overly stress it either.
That would be in the post town council notice.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So with the changes that have been proposed here, do these still seem to be within the four corners?
Oh,
of the warrant
sure.
article?
I don't have any problem with that. I'm just thinking about mechanically how we do this, because the voters are going to go to town meeting. They've got a warrant, and the warrant sets forth the bylaw as currently proposed. And now we're going to honeycomb it with lots of little changes. I think what we probably want to do is to have a highlighted, you know, with strikeouts and underlines, tracked changes draft that we would hand out, hopefully in color, to everybody who's there. And I think probably the most efficient way of going about it would be the person who presents the motion would present a motion, would present that version as the main motion. That is, don't have any amendments. Just make sure that the first, hopefully only, main motion under the article is to enact a bylaw that's like but not identical to the one in the warrant. You can do that.
And that would fall realistically to Theo as the chair of the planning board, since the planning board is the one who's initiated the motion.
Yeah.
Theo, is that something you'd be comfortable with?
Yeah. So I was thinking the gist of this was to say that you still wanted me to come back in May, but I'm certainly, if you think it's doable and politically feasible, then we certainly want to take every opportunity to get this done correctly and get this done in November. So.
Oh, okay.
This-
There's another option here, which is to move in indefinite postponement
Right.
on the grounds that we're working on it, and then come back with the revised article at a future town meeting. I certainly don't mean to suggest that you not do that.
Right.
I'm always in favor of simple rather than complicated, and
Mhm.
what I suggested is kind of complicated.
No, I appreciate that too, and that's, I think, simpler is better.
I think we have both options are on the table. I think both are very viable. And part of it is, this is such a short town meeting with only 6 articles, that I think that if we propose it and we just hand out the revised proposal, and as long as would realistically probably necessitate the planning board to formally accept it beforehand, you could call a short meeting to do that. And provided that that's there, I don't think that there would be much discussion or problem with the replacement motion, especially if this body, says, okay, we are in support of this motion as well, and we have a representative from town council who says, yes, this seems good. The town council will obviously have the opportunity to review it as well. I think that we could certainly do it at this town meeting, partially because of how short the town meeting is probably going to be. I also think that, to what Tom was saying, simpler can be better as well. So with that, I really throw it to you as to your preference. If how much stress you want on it. I think that on the one hand, it can be a really good example of, okay, town boards working together to come up with something that really meets the needs of the town better. Where I think that with the changes that we've discussed tonight, this becomes a really good bylaw.
Mhm.
So it's your comfort level, since you're the one who will have to make that motion in the first place, as to what I think is the best action.
Yeah.
Thoughts from others as well?
One question I have for Tom, given the town council's role with warrants, does this amended language have to come back before us, before town meeting? I don't know the answer.
Oh, no, the town council only issues the warrant.
Right, so we don't have to see that, okay.
No.
The second thing is, the reason I agree with Tom on this approach with redoing the language and having the new iteration go before town meeting is, there was an amendment to 2 bylaws that was done back in 2021. And it was cumbersome in that there was an amendment page that was passed out at town meeting. This was also during the pandemic. And unfortunately, on both those bylaws, the version that's listed as our bylaws does not contain the amended language. And that's being rectified now. That doesn't have to go through the bylaws review committee, because it was approved language, but it didn't make it into the version that got sent to the state and approved by the state. And that's because it was an amended document presented at town meeting with the actual warrant. So I think the way that Tom wants to redo this makes it a lot easier and avoids the risk that the wrong language ends up getting into the bylaws.
Yeah. I think I think we are coming to the agreement that simpler is better. And even if it comes to the May warrant, where there's a lot of stuff on the agenda, if you say, this is clear and simple, and two boards have worked together and everybody's in agreement, people will say, done. All right. Y'all have given me a lot of brain power and a lot of time tonight, and I really do appreciate it. I am gonna do my darndest to schedule another planning board meeting before the warrant and discuss it with the rest of the planning board. So.
So with that, Tom, could we task you with getting the amended language in just in case the planning board decides that they want to move forward? So we could do a replacement motion if necessary,
Oh, sure.
but the anticipation is that you'll have it all done. So it'll be the easiest warrant article you have to do for May.
All right.
So other comments, questions? So for the bylaw review committee members, does this approach and with the language changes that we've discussed tonight, do you agree that the bylaw review as a body can support the chapter 175 proposal on names and numbers as proposed with the amendments for tonight? If we can take a vote, if we can have a motion to that effect?
Yes.
Okay, who would like to make a motion that we support the chapter 175 streets and sidewalks names and numbers proposal as amended?
So moved.
Okay, Ann's making it. Who wants to second it?
I'll second.
Okay, Joe is being fast on the second. Any further discussion? Okay, with that, we'll do roll call in the order that you appear on my screen. Ann,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric, if you're having trouble with the microphone, if you just want to do a thumbs up or thumbs down, we can take that as a visual indicator. Okay, that's a thumbs up. Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative as well. So with that, Theo, you now have unanimous support from another board for this. And this is, I think, a really good example of how the boards can work together and how we can come up with, in the end, a really good product to meet the needs of the town and ultimately affecting lots of different people in the town as well.
Yeah.
So concept from the planning board, and I appreciate you spending the time with us to really work through this. And Tom, of course, has to work through the language pieces, and he gets no rest for the wearing.
Yeah. I again, thanks to all of you and certainly Tom Mullen for we're grateful for the work and great for the teamwork and the appreciation. So and Tom, I'm available as you need me. So I'll certainly be following up. And don't forget Wakefield Master Plan, do the online survey, come to the next meetings. So it's all good. But
And
thank
anyone
you
who
again,
wants
everybody.
anyone who wants the longest terms possible in elected office in Wakefield, it's the planning board, 5-year terms.
Beautiful.
Once elected, you don't have to run for re-election for 4.5 to 5 years. So if anyone wants to go into that role, Anne served on town council, which was 3-year terms, and she survived it. But it's one of those things that's a lot of running.
Yeah,
And Tom, you had experience with that too.
The only other people with 5-year terms are the Housing Authority and the chair of the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, you've just doomed the master plan right there.
So the master plan is something that I do recommend all of the bylaw review committee members take a look at and review, because it will become fundamental as we start going through the zoning pieces as well. So that's where these boards will get to work even more closely together. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. I suspect that we will be spending many more hours together over the next year and a half or so.
Well, great. That's something we look forward to too. So I'm happy, really happy to help. So, all right.
And Tom will be appreciative of that Mr. Dombrowski or one of his staff will be able to handle most of those pieces, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. So with that, I close out that item. Chapter 51 reports. Eric, do you have audio at your location? It looks like you're at the library. Do you have audio that's working on that computer? Oh, got a vacuum cleaner.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Theo.
Thanks, Theo.
Okay, so competing with a vacuum cleaner is going to be extraordinarily difficult. It sounds like they're cleaning the library at the moment. We're trying to clean up bylaws. The vacuum cleaner is going to win for this evening. So what we will do, because we do want to hear your proposals and recommendations for Chapter 51, is we will put it at the top of the next meeting, which is scheduled to be on November 21st. So that's where we will pick up with the next meeting itself. So Eric, if at 7 o'clock, if you can try to get things arranged. If you need a headset or something like that, be in contact with me. I can get you a headset that may help with the audio pieces as well. You also have the ability to dial in, and if you've got a phone available, or if you want to participate just by phone, that's also an option as well. So when we have that meeting, I'll happily send you the information for that. So Chapter 56 and 62, I know the chair of the town council wanted to give some input on. Maureen Butt, she wasn't sure if she'd be able to join us, so we will again defer those items and pick those up. Those are relatively quick bylaws that were reviewed, that just talks about the town council's legal responsibilities and treasurer's legal responsibilities. I don't think that there'll be much discussion, but I don't want to discourage either the town council nor treasurer's office from the ability to chime in on those pieces. So brings us to item 5 on the agenda, update on professional assistance with zoning. And that would be where things are with the contract with Mr. Dombrowski. Tom, do you know if there's been any further action on that?
No, I'm sorry, there hasn't been. I'll get in touch with him.
Okay, thank you. So for upcoming dates, item 6, there are 3 things coming up very quickly. First one is coming up starting in the morning, and that is we have a state election. I'm sure that everyone is aware, based upon the number of signs, commercials, other media, text messages, submissions, and everything else. Please, if you have not already voted, vote. If you have already voted, thank you for giving your opinion. It is always important for everyone to vote it whenever we have the opportunity to.
What time is that? 8 o'clock? Does it start? Does it start 8 a.m.?
I thought 7, but I could be wrong.
7?
Should be 7 a.m. to 8.
I think it's 7 a.m.
7 to 8 at night. Okay.
At the Galvin Middle School, all precincts are together. If you don't know your precinct, they will look up your street and tell you the precinct that you're part of. So we got a lot of important things on the election, and really it is important. There's also 4 ballot questions. Please go ahead and make your opinion known on those. Next, we have town meeting. This will be a week from Saturday at 9 a.m. in the Galvin Auditorium. And it is incumbent by our charter that all members of boards be there. If you have a need to be absent, please just send me some sort of note so that I can document the rationale for your absence in case it is actually questioned. In my years of public service, it has not actually been requested by anyone other than if a chair is absent, but it is something that is technically required. And given our role, I'll at least want to let you know of that. If you have not been to a town meeting before, They tend to be very interesting events where anyone from the town who's a registered voter has the ability to get up, talk, ask questions, and so forth. This particular meeting, with only a few items on the warrant, should be very quick. I anticipated the meeting itself will probably be over in under 90 minutes. Maybe under 60, which would probably be a record. Tom, I'm not sure if the shortest town meeting that you've ever been a part of is, but this is probably among the shortest that I can recall.
Well, I remember the
Don't jinx it.
longest.
So there will be another town meeting that is anticipated in January. That one will probably only have a single item on the warrant, but it will probably generate a fair amount of discussion. So just so you're aware of the different things that are coming up. And then our next meeting is currently by our schedule is for Monday, the 21st, which is the Monday before Thanksgiving at 7 p.m. by Zoom. Does anyone know that presents a particular problem? Being by Zoom may make this a bit easier for people even if you're traveling. It is before Turkey, so you won't have that as an excuse for falling asleep. All of the Friday boards have that excuse. Thursday boards as well. Okay. With that, any other items for future meetings? Otherwise, the items that I have headlining it are going to be chapters 51 reports. Eric, we're going to put you on the spot for that one. Make sure we can get your feedback on it. Chapter 56 for the town council, 62 for the treasurer, and that will probably be the summation for that. And then there will probably be a discussion of town meeting and how things were handled for those of you who are at that meeting. It sounds like it will probably be a vote for an indefinite postponement, which will be largely a pretty standard type of quick vote, as opposed to having to get into things. But not knowing how the planning board is going to vote, having the replacement motion there may be necessary. Because at the planning board meetings, they were pretty adamant they wanted to get a bylaw in place. So that's the reason for the request to have it at least ready. Anything else? Okay. So let's see. We haven't heard much from Catherine for this. So do you want to perhaps make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Eric, is the vacuum cleaner still going, or are you able to do a second? If you want to do a second, if you can hold up two fingers, we will take that as affirmative knowledge. Okay, Eric is seconding the motion to adjourn. We want to make sure everyone gets involved with this. So with that, we're going to take roll call vote. Anne.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Eric. Thumbs up. We'll work on that. Catherine.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Lucy.
Yes.
And I vote in the affirmative, so we will adjourn at 8:54. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I think we did really, really good work tonight in handling a bylaw with a lot of complexity, a lot of issues, but ultimately this is where we are able to really help make our town really good with its bylaws. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Have a great night, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.